The sea was too calm, too quiet. On the radar of the USNS Liberty, a Navy supply ship, a blur appeared first, then a series of signals that looked like atmospheric instability. The operator blinked, adjusted filters, recalibrated frequencies. But the contacts didn't vanish. Instead, they multiplied. What had seemed like noise began aligning into clear patterns, dozens of small blips, fast and low, crawling across the screen like a swarm. "Civilian traffic?" the officer on watch asked. The operator swallowed hard. "Negative, sir. No transponders, no response on open channel. They're coming in formation." In that instant, the general quarters alarm screamed across the ship. What seconds earlier had been a quiet night routine turned into chaos. Doors were sealed, hatches locked, sailors ran to battle stations. The Liberty wasn't a destroyer, nor a cruiser. It was a logistics vessel carrying fuel, ammunition, and supplies, a fat, vulnerable target. And worse, it stood alone. Its closest escort, the USS Mason, was still nearly an hour away. Out in the darkness, under the pale light of the moon, the radar blips became reality. 31 fast skiffs, small but many. They moved in waves, lights off, no signals, cutting through the water like predators in a hunt. Some carried ladders, others bore the silhouettes of mounted weapons. It was unmistakable. This wasn't fishing, this was a coordinated assault. On the bridge, the captain requested immediate clearance from Fifth Fleet, but the satellite response lagged. 10 seconds felt like eternity while the enemy raced forward at 40 knots. Inside the steel hull, sailors and civilian mariners worked side by side. 50 caliber machine guns were unlocked. The point defense system, meant for missiles, was switched to manual mode against boats. On deck, tense fingers hovered millimeters from triggers, eyes locked on the black horizon. Then came the moment that froze them all. One skiff broke formation, charging straight for midship at full throttle. The radar ticked the distance, 1,000 yards, 800, 500, the growl of its engine now audible even without scopes. The captain hesitated only as long as necessary. A metallic voice cracked over the comms. "Hostile intent confirmed. Rules of engagement authorized. Engage." The order was still echoing when the first 50 caliber roared. Tracer rounds slashed through the night, sparking off the water, striking the skiff's bow. The boat didn't turn. It accelerated, intent written in its path. A second burst split the hull open, sending fiberglass and fire scattering across the waves. The skiff veered sharply, burning, but two more immediately surged forward to fill the gap. Relief lasted only seconds. This was no improvised raid. This was a calculated test of American defenses. The CIWS spat its first deafening burst, 20mm rounds shrieking at 4,500 per minute, shredding another vessel into mist. The horizon lit up like a man-made lightning storm. Yet more boats pressed in. The next minutes turned the Liberty into a fortress under siege. Machine guns hammered. Sailors sprinted ammunition belts across smoke-filled decks. Loudspeakers blasted warnings in English, Arabic, and Somali. The replies? Silence. Just the snarl of approaching engines. And when the first boarding attempt came, the fight changed. 4 men climbed the hull nets, machetes and rifles in hand. They met resistance from sailors who, until that night, had only trained to move cargo and refuel warships. A supply technician swung a fire axe. A Navy master-at-arms fired point blank. Smoke grenades choked the deck. Blood slicked the steel. Elsewhere, Molotov cocktails shattered against bulkheads, flames licking electrical cables, alarms blaring as damage control raced to contain fires before the fuel stores went up. Every passing minute dragged like an hour. The radar operator shouted again, "New contacts! Northeast! At least 10 more!" The bridge echoed with disbelief and dread. "Where the hell is the Mason?" 40 minutes after the first contact, salvation appeared. A new radar signature lit up the CIC. The USS Mason, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, charging in at flank speed. A warship bristling with firepower. The Mk-45 deck gun thundered, firing illumination rounds that turned the night into day. Shockwaves rippled the sea. Some boats scattered immediately. Others pressed forward in suicidal defiance. The destroyer unleashed its arsenal. The phalanx CIWS screamed, reducing skiffs to splinters. Overhead, drones launched, painting the battle with infrared feeds, marking targets for the fire control team. Explosions flashed, water erupted, boats burned or flipped, men leapt into the sea. And yet, amid victory, the chilling truth settled. This wasn't random piracy. The captured radios weren't homemade. The charts found later carried silhouettes of NATO vessels. This had been a planned operation, reconnaissance disguised as chaos. When the last echoes of gunfire faded and the sea stilled, silence fell over both ships. No cheers, no celebration. Only exhaustion, scorched steel, blood on deck, and the heavy realization. This had only been the first strike. As dawn broke over the Red Sea, the captain's voice carried across the bridge, firm and grim. "Record everything, every detail. This will happen again." And on the horizon, still cloaked in haze, every sailor knew he was right. The Red Sea was deceptively calm at sunrise. Burned debris still floated near the Liberty's hull, black scars trailing across the water. Smoke lingered, mixing with the salty air. On the bridge, exhausted sailors slumped in silence, the adrenaline of survival draining into bone-deep fatigue. But the captain didn't rest. His eyes fixed on the tactical display, where the USS Mason's destroyer icon pulsed steady green. He knew what most of his crew didn't yet grasp. What they had faced was not meant to sink them. It was meant to probe them. "Sir," the radar operator said quietly, "we're picking up something else. Subsurface anomaly. Roughly 4,000 yards off port bow." The captain's stomach tightened. "Submarine?" The Mason's ASW team confirmed within minutes. It wasn't a sub. At least not in the traditional sense. The sonar detected metallic signatures, faint propulsion, multiple contacts moving slowly just beneath the surface. Drones, autonomous undersea drones advancing like shadows. Small, quiet, each no bigger than a torpedo. And they weren't approaching the Liberty. They were circling it. The realization hit like a gut punch. Last night had been the distraction. This was the real mission. Whoever was behind this had risked dozens of men and boats just to mask the deployment of something far more advanced. "Bridge, this is Mason. We have clearance from 5th Fleet. Authorize engagement." Moments later, the sea erupted. Depth charges hammered the waves. Sonar pulses echoed like thunder. One by one, the drones were neutralized, until one slipped through. Inside the Liberty's engine room, alarms blared. The floor shuddered. Not an explosion, a detonation. The blast came from inside the hull. Damage control rushed in, choking smoke and flooding compartments. The drone had latched on magnetically and burrowed into the supply ship's belly before self-destructing. Not enough to sink her, but enough to cripple engines and power lines. Darkness rolled across the Liberty. For a heartbeat, the ship drifted, blind and vulnerable. On the horizon, another formation appeared. This time, not skiffs, larger silhouettes, fast attack craft armed with heavier weapons advancing in disciplined formation. Whoever orchestrated this wasn't finished. The Mason adjusted course, guns already tracking. But the captain of the Liberty knew the truth. The enemy had achieved their objective. They had tested the convoy system, forced the Navy to reveal tactics, and left the supply ship wounded. In the Combat Information Center, one sailor whispered what everyone thought, but no one dared to voice. "If this is only reconnaissance, what's coming next?" The captain didn't answer. He stared at the chart, where the Red Sea narrowed into the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, one of the most vital choke points on Earth. And in that silence, the message was clear. The next battle wouldn't be a swarm. It would be a blockade. The Liberty limped forward, escorted by the USS Mason. Smoke poured from her funnels, power running only on emergency generators. Inside, sailors worked in suffocating heat to contain flooding and reroute circuits. She could still float, but she was bleeding. The captain knew the truth. They couldn't outrun what was coming. Not through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. At 0640, Mason's radar lit up again. This time the contacts weren't small. They were big. Too big. Fast attack craft, at least 6. Possibly Iranian or Houthi supplied. Equipped with missile launchers, radar-guided guns, and behind them, something larger. A corvette-sized silhouette, running dark. The Mason immediately moved to intercept, turning broadside, deck guns locked and loaded. The Liberty remained behind, limping, its crew tense and pale. On the Mason's bridge, Commander Hayes barked orders. "Load SM-2s. Harpoons on standby. I want air cover now." But the request came back delayed. The nearest air wing was still hours away. For the next 30 minutes, the Mason and the Liberty were alone. The sea grew tense, heavy. The enemy formation advanced steadily, cutting across the water with surgical precision. Range to target, 20,000 yards. "They're locking radar." The first missile launch was unmistakable. A fiery plume erupted from the enemy craft. The shriek of warning klaxons filled both ships. The Mason responded instantly. 2 SM-2 missiles thundered into the sky, trailing fire. Seconds later, the Aegis system spat a wall of chaff, electronic jamming flooding the air. A flash lit the horizon. One incoming missile disintegrated mid-air. The other streaked closer, then vanished in a curtain of CIWS fire, torn to shrapnel 100 yards from the hull. The ocean boiled with steel and fire. Machine guns rattled from the Liberty, sailors firing blindly at fast boats closing in. The Mason's deck gun roared, sending shells screaming across the water. One enemy craft exploded, splitting in half. Another surged forward, riddled but determined. And then came the shadow. The corvette finally revealed itself, switching on targeting radar. Its size dwarfed the smaller craft, bristling with armament. The Liberty didn't stand a chance against it. The Mason was outgunned, outnumbered, and out of time. Commander Hayes clenched his jaw. Prepare harpoon launch. Fire control. Priority target, that corvette. The destroyer shook as the harpoon missiles launched, skimming low across the waves. The corvette fired countermeasures, but one harpoon struck true. The impact tore into its hull, fireball erupting from the midsection. Still, it kept moving, limping, its guns spitting fury. The battle became chaos. Tracer rounds stitched the night. Sailors shouted through smoke. The Liberty's crew fought off boarding attempts with everything from rifles to welding torches. The Mason's CIWS screamed until barrels glowed red. And through it all, the captain of the Liberty realized something chilling. Every move, every countermeasure, every shot, they were being watched, not just by drones, not just by boats, but by satellites. High above, someone was recording it all. Testing, studying, preparing. This wasn't the real war. This was the rehearsal. As the sun climbed higher, the surviving enemy boats broke off, dragging their wounded corvette away. Silence settled again, broken only by the hiss of fire hoses and the cries of the injured. On the Liberty's bridge, the captain's voice was hoarse but steady. This isn't about us. This is about the strait. The next time they won't just test us. They'll close it. And with those words, every sailor understood. The Red Sea was no longer just a shipping lane, it was a battlefield.